and welcome to Man's Model Moments. In today's video I'm going to be building the Zvezda Su-57 Felon, but as a quick disclaimer, this was actually a kit I started before the YouTube channel actually started. It was one of those that I intended to start the channel with, but then the invasion of Ukraine really put me off the idea of doing a Russian subject from a Russian manufacturer. Having said that, it's been a while now. Ukraine really are pushing back the Russian invasion, and I thought it was time to actually publish this video. So if I cover the main parts of the kit itself, the kit is really nicely boxed. It's all packaged separately, so you have individual bags for clear sprues, a lot of the main sprues, all the accessory sprues, and the actual kit itself is really nicely moulded. If I would say anything, the panel lines are a little soft, and it's one of the reasons I decided not to really add weathering to this kit, because one, it's a very new airframe, there aren't very many actually in production or flying, and also it makes it difficult to achieve that with such subtle panel lines. Now, because this is such an early video, I'm afraid the quality of the video itself isn't up to the current standard, so please bear with me. This is really as I was learning a lot of the techniques. So as I mentioned, the transparencies are bagged separately. You do get a couple of pilots, one multi-part seated pilot and one standing that you could use with a diorama, which is pretty nice. Moving on to all of the bagged accessories, you get a couple of identical sprues covering fuel tanks, missiles. I won't actually be showing any of this because these were for external stores and I wanted to show it in its full stealth configuration. Even though the Su-57 is debatably a stealth aircraft, I would think it's more low observable. You also get a couple of options for the thrust vectored nozzles, so you can depict them slightly drooped as they are when the aircraft is parked. You get a couple of sprues showing some larger standoff missiles, air-to-ground, showing the capability of a strike aircraft, but again, these are really in its so-called beast mode, non-stealth configuration, and I'm not going to be showing the aircraft like that, so you do get a lot of spares from this kit that you can use in other model projects. The final sprue then covers all of the air intakes, the horizontal and vertical stabilizers, as well as a couple of different versions of the forward sort of flapper-on pieces on the leading edge wing root. You do get a nice little ladder as well. And the cockpit tub is fairly basic with a decal for the instrument panel. Moving on to the instructions, you get a pretty comprehensive set of instructions. They're black and white, set out over this trifold format, going through all the normal stages in the order that you would pretty much expect from an aircraft kit of this sort of generation. So starting off the build, we tackle the ejection seat, and this is actually quite a detailed item for a standard injection molded kit part. It does have a couple of pretty fiddly pieces, but obviously that adds to the overall look that you get in the end, but it nicely goes together with little Tamiya extra thin. Next we move on to the air intake ducts. The slightly serpentine ducts also incorporate the inside detail moulding for the wheel wells. And these all go together with minimal cleanup. So the undercarriage bays actually attach to these air intake ducts. And the fit is pretty good. just requiring some Tamiya thin along the edges to secure those in place. To finish those off, we just add the turbine blades. And then those air ducts can be added into the lower half of the main fuselage. Fit here is pretty good, and again, just needing some Tamiya thin to put them in place. Once those are in place, we can add the external pieces of those. So this just encases those in the exterior fuselage, just to complete the overall look. So you just need to be a bit careful with the alignment here to make sure that you're getting all of these in place properly, and to minimise any cleanup that you might need to do if those are slightly misaligned. The kit exhausts include full afterburner assemblies, and I'm sure this is an area where you can get aftermarket accessories, but I'm not sure it's really needed because these items are pretty detailed. They may be a little bit out of scale, but they look pretty good overall. They just need a little bit of coaxing into place with some tweezers and a little bit of Tamiya thin just to secure them in. The vertical stabilizers include some intakes, and those are just added from beneath just to create this quite distinctive inlet. And they also have these rather strange little pieces that just add in to where the vertical stabilizers actually fit. The horizontal stabilizers you can actually put either in flight or in parked configuration. So for parked configuration you just need to add these little inserts. They just give the required angle when it's sitting. They need a little bit of trimming, but otherwise a bit of Tamiya extra thin again gets them all in place. The leading edge root extensions, again, come in a couple of different forms, one for in-flight and one for parked configuration. Again, I'm opting for the parked configuration. And then the main wheels, just a standard two-part and go together without any issues. The vectored exhausts need a bit of test fitting to make sure that you get them in the correct orientation, because they will create some pretty big gaps if you don't. But again, it's fairly easy, and a bit of Tamiya thin secures those in place without any problems. Fitting the undercarriage together is pretty straightforward as well, just requires a little bit of adjustment to get the actuator rods in place. And they form quite a strong structure when they're dry. Front undercarriage is a little bit more fiddly, with a few more components, but again doesn't pose too many problems. It does have this large light panel which goes on the front, and it has a clear piece which goes on top of this, which I'll place on later when this is all dried and painted. Now the Su-57 is a pretty big aircraft and requires quite a bit of nose weight. Here I'm using fishing weights and just putting them into the lower fuselage half, just securing them with some super glue. And just check the fitting when you're doing this, just to make sure that these aren't preventing the fit of the two fuselage halves together with the cockpit tub. So here you can see I've got the cockpit tub already in place, painted. So here you can see I just needed to take out one of the weights just to make sure that there was enough room. And then just flatten a couple of these others just to make sure that they're not pushing up too much against that cockpit tub. Once that's done, I'm just filling in the gaps with some of these smaller pieces. And again, just putting in more super glue and test fitting again. Once that's all dry, it's time to join the fuselage together. As I mentioned, you can see I've got the cockpit tub already painted and fitted here. And I'm just using some normal Tamiya standard cement here, just to give me a bit more working time, because it's a pretty big area that this aircraft has to join together. Then I'm just using some Tamiya thin just to go into those gaps, just to make sure that we've got some active cement on all of the areas of the aircraft. And then I'm going ahead and clamping all the way across this just to make sure that we're getting good adhesion. Because as I say, it is a big aircraft. It does need quite a lot of different pressure points to make sure that we're getting proper joining of all the areas and not getting any gaps forming. Once the fuselage is dry, you can add the engine inserts. And then once those are in place, we can add the exhausts, just making sure that these vectored exhausts are in the correct place with that sort of droop and slightly outward cant of the engine. We can then add the horizontal stabilizers, and here you can see that little extra piece just giving them the correct angle so that they sit in this nice drooped position for the parked aircraft. And the final piece here on the main body are the leading edge root extensions, again just showing them in that slightly drooped configuration. So here you can see how not to apply cement. You can see I put far too much on there. It's just a matter of just dabbing that off before it dries and then just leaving it, because otherwise you can get into a horrible mess. The front bay door can actually be attached. It's actually closed. It only opens for the aircraft actually coming into land. With that, we can actually move on to starting to paint the aircraft. So here I'm just spraying the bare metal across the engines. Like a lot of Russian aircraft, the skin around the engines isn't painted. Then I moved to the heads-up display. Here I've gone across this with a couple of coats of Waywatcher Green from Games Workshop. That's easiest just to do while it's on the sprue. And then I'm just using white glue to attach it in position. With that I can actually attach the front part of the canopy, again just using white glue. And then it's time to actually get on and mask the canopy using my usual combination of Tamiya masking tape, artist masking fluid and white glue just to tack on the rear canopy whilst it's going to be painted. With the canopy and the rear exhausts all masked up, it's time to move on to airbrushing. Here I'm just going over with a coat of light grey. This is quite a warm colour, so this is actually a mix of Pro Acryl Bright Warm Grey and Army Painter Uniform Grey. I'm also going over all of the other parts like the undercarriage, which need to be the same colour. In terms of the camouflage masking of this aircraft, I actually went for the digital camouflage and created my own masks with the Tamiya masking tape using plans, which I just, as you can see here, cut with a scalpel over the tape and then very carefully applied that to the items. Here is one of the vertical stabilizers. And this does take quite a bit of time, and retrospectively would I have done this? Probably not. But once it's all done, it's a very easy matter to actually spray this using this kind of bluish grey disruptive camouflage scheme to make the aircraft appear to be smaller than it is in flight. Whether that works or not, I'm not sure, but it does look pretty cool. So painting this aircraft takes a fraction of the time it takes to actually prepare all of the masking, which does take forever and is a real pain. You can get pre-cut masks for these, but they are pretty expensive, so hence the option here that I took of just making my own from plans and Tamiya masking tape. Once that's all dry, it's time to do the other detail parts, such as the nose cone, the edges of the vertical stabilizers. These are all just in a slightly off-white. And then many of the leading edges are in this slightly bluish tan grey colour, which is obviously because they have radar warning receiver aerials and other pieces of electronics in here. Once that's all dry and unmasked, the aircraft can then be given an all-over coat of varnish. Here I'm just using my standard Pledge. And then it's time for decaling. So the decals in the Zvezda kit are very thin. Some of them are pretty large. As you can see from this one, they need a bit of adjustment. They are quite fragile, and it does take quite a long time to coax them into place without breaking them or having them fold over on each other. So it's great that they provide these extensive decals, but it would be nice if they were slightly more robust, because it does take hours to decal the aircraft. Once that is all complete, then it's just all these small little transparency pieces that need putting on. And of course I'm just going to be using my standard white glue. And then finally, the rear canopy can be glued in place just using standard Tamiya thin, which gives us the completed model. So in conclusion, the Zvezda kit is pretty solid. I wouldn't have any problem recommending it. It really captures the look of the Su-57 pretty accurately. It's a pretty handsome aircraft, despite whatever you might think of the Russian Federation's current political agenda, and that's one of the reasons that I put the Ukrainian national anthem over the final views of this model, really as a tribute to the people of Ukraine and their resistance to the illegal invasion of their country by the Russian Federation. So although this is an awesome piece of technology, there aren't very many in service, there aren't very many that have been produced, so it is really a piece of political propaganda, but it is an awesome looking aircraft despite that and despite what its actual stealth performance might be. That's all for this instalment of Man's Model Moments. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel for more like it, and share this video with others you think would also enjoy it. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and if you're feeling generous, then I also have a Patreon, which is absolutely the best way of helping me to grow the channel and produce more content like this. With that, I hope you have plenty of modelling moments of your own, and I look forward to welcoming you on the next video.